Hi, my name is Bill Flanagan. I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Alberta, and I'm really delighted to welcome all of you here this evening for the second President's Speakers Series. And we have a number of honored guests here from the university with us, and of course our panelists are here, and many of their family members as well. A very warm welcome to all of you. At the outset, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that the university is located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. And as I mentioned, tonight marks the second in a series of President's Speakers Series. And this is a series that we launched about 6 months ago. And I thought one of the greatest things about my job is that I get to meet so many talented researchers, staff, and students here at the University of Alberta. And I get a chance to see the extraordinary strength of research happening on our campuses and just the incredible talent at the University of Alberta. And I thought, well, I want to share some of that with the broader community and with the broader university community and beyond. And so that's really where the President's Speakers Series originated, an opportunity to share with all of you some of the extraordinary things happening at the University of Alberta that make me so proud to be a member of this extraordinary community. And we've had a number of exciting events in the university in the past several weeks, and one of the most exciting was the launch of our new strategic plan, SHAPE, which sets a very ambitious agenda for the university for the next 10 years. We were able to launch this plan in September, and you might have seen some of the headlines that got quite a bit of attention, and I think it has generated a lot of excitement on campus. One of the things that's really exciting about the province of Alberta is a very young province, a very young demographic. We have the fastest growing population of young people in Canada between the ages of 18 and 22. What that means is that we need to grow as a university. And indeed, the whole post-secondary sector in Alberta needs to grow to accommodate all of these young people who are seeking post-secondary opportunities right here in Alberta. To accommodate this growing demographic in Alberta, the post-secondary sector in Alberta will have to grow by at least an additional 40,000 spots. So in our strategic plan, we've set the ambitious target to grow to over 60,000 students in the next 10 years. We're currently 44,000 students, and probably a number of you are alumni and you're remembering a time when the university was considerably smaller than 44,000 students, and you might be wondering, oh my goodness, well, how is it even possible that we would get to 60,000 students? Well, we need to do that in order to continue to be that beacon of opportunity for young Albertans that the University of Alberta has been for the past 115 years. So I'm in active conversation with the government of Alberta about the funding, the necessary funding that we would need to grow at that scale. And we're also targeting an additional growth in our numbers of international students. We're enormously fortunate to draw such talented international students from around the world who want to come to study at the University of Alberta. As many as 60% of these students will stay in Alberta upon graduating because they've decided they want to stay in Canada and pursue their careers here in Canada. Again, an enormously talented pool of graduates who are contributing to a growing province, a growing economy. So in addition to growth, which is a big target for us, an additional 16,000 students, this will mean a changed campus. We're going to have to be very thoughtful about how we can accommodate an additional 16,000 students. We're going to have to make significant investments in faculty and staff to ensure that those students, these additional students, will continue to have an outstanding learning experience at the University of Alberta. So I think we've embarked on a remarkable period of growth. Indeed, faster growth than the university has ever experienced, even when you take the 60s and the 70s into account, which some of us may remember as a time of rapid growth of post-secondary in Alberta. So in addition to education and focus on students, research is also a major focus of this strategic plan. And one of the things we did hear about when we did consultations, community consultations to draft this strategic plan, many community members said to us, we ought to focus more prominently on our areas of greatest research strength at the University of Alberta, areas where we have already achieved global prominence, and continue to invest in those areas to the maximum benefit and impact for the university, for Alberta, for Canada, and around the world. So we've identified the three areas, and none of these three will come as a surprise to you: energy and environment. We, of course, have been a research superpower on energy for well over a century. with the challenges of climate change and the urgent need to develop net zero energy solutions, the University of Alberta is literally at the world's forefront of developing those solutions that will enable us to address the challenges of climate change. And second, tonight's topic is artificial intelligence, where we are ranked among the top 5 universities in the world for AI. And tonight we're going to have an opportunity to explore, and we've all been reading about AI and how it's going to change all of our lives. And I see Rich Sutton is in the audience, and Rich is one of our leading lights in the field of AI. And Rich and I have had many fascinating conversations about AI, and I look forward to many more. And we're going to have some fascinating conversations tonight as well about AI and how it's going to impact our lives, and in particular, how the University of Alberta is driving these innovations forward. And finally, health is another area, health and human health and wellness, an area where the University of Alberta has excelled for well over a century. And we were of course, we were all very proud that the University of Alberta, our colleague, Dr. Michael Houghton, was recognized with the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2020 for identifying the virus that causes hepatitis C. Once again, really positioning the University of Alberta on the forefront of developments around human health and wellness. So I think with the growth agenda that we've outlined in the strategic plan, the ambitious plans to increase our impact, to increase the number of students who can benefit from the experience of studying at the University of Alberta, this is an opportunity for us. We're currently ranked among the top 100 universities in the world, top 5 in Canada, and we've set a very ambitious target to, within the next 10 years, rank among the top 50 universities in the world and the top 3 in Canada. And you might wonder, how is it possible that we can have this ambition at that scale? Well, if we're able to grow to 60,000 students, the additional revenue that would generate for the university would be well over $400 million a year. $400 million a year we could invest in teaching and research to even greater impact around the globe. So, as you may know, we've had a rather rocky last 3 years. I mean, we all went through the challenges of COVID. We had some significant financial challenges at the university. I think I'm here tonight to report that we have turned the corner and the future is bright for the University of Alberta. And I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to it, because the last 3 years were a lot of hard work and a real struggle and challenges for our community. We've turned the corner, and the future for the University of Alberta, I think, is an extraordinarily bright one. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, that's my campaign speech. I hope But as you may tell, I am very enthusiastic about the future for the university. So tonight, it's my great pleasure to introduce our 3 panelists. And our first panelist is Patrick Pilarski. He's an associate professor in the Division of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation in the Department of Medicine. That was a bit of a mouthful. AI never would have made that mistake. And Patrick co-leads the Blink. It goes by Blink. The Blink Lab, and focuses on human-machine interaction for people with limb differences and other users of rehabilitation and assistive technology. And he's going to speak about the importance of reinforcement learning and AI decision-making, robotics, and the use of AI to amplify learned human abilities. And our second panelist is Faith Majigolobe. And Faith is an assistant professor of the Faculty of Law. And Faith specializes in intellectual property and technology law, and has sparked worldwide discussions about copyright as it relates to knowledge access, innovation, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And today she will share her experience with us as she discusses the role of law in AI governance, with a focus on the role of intellectual property law in AI development and ethics. Welcome, Faith. And Martha White is our third panelist, and Martha is an associate professor of computer science here at the university. She is the CFAR AI chair and has authored more than 50 papers in leading journals, and has earned the AI's 10 to Watch, the Future of AI Award in 2020. And tonight, Martha will share her knowledge of algorithms. Okay, I'm a law professor. for continuous learning from data streams and representation learning, and how these approaches propel decision-making and empower humans. And so following the three presentations, I'll have an opportunity to sit down with Martha and Faith and Patrick. We'll have a little Q&A session, and we'll be answering questions. And there's also a number of questions that have been submitted by the audience, and so we'll be covering some of those questions. So please join me in welcoming our three panelists. And Patrick, over to you.
Not yet. It will. Hello, folks. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. I'm using speaking notes today so I stay on time and don't run us way over into the dark of night. I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you and to be part of the proceedings. As President Flanagan noted, I'm a computing scientist in the Department of Medicine, in particular in a division that specializes in care of the muscles, nerves, and bones, which is called physiatry. I'm sorry to say that I had no idea what physiatry was until I Googled it when I was literally joining the physiatry division. And it's much faster than saying physical medicine, and anyway, yeah, I have trouble too. Right? So I do want to take a tiny side here and say that I think that it's weird to have a computing scientist in the Department of Medicine. It wasn't very common, and I think it's one example of what the UVA has been really doing as a thought leader to position AI expertise in adjacent non-AI fields to really amplify what we do all across campus. I think this is a really exciting time. So as a tagline, my tagline for what I do, for hopefully that you'll all be excited about, is I create AI-powered bionic body parts. Really, my work on AI, artificial intelligence, sits at the intersection of what we consider hardware, software, and wetware, human tissue. And so over my career, I've focused on really deeply understanding the interactions between humans and intelligent machines, especially AI systems that continually adapt and change and are going to improve in close moment-by-moment contact with humans and the human body. So it's a very intersectional kind of research with human and machine work. I can see all of you like, hey, that sounds kind of like the Borg from Star Trek. It is nothing like the Borg from Star Trek. I promise you we're not doing that here at the University of Alberta. I will say, though, that our cross-campus teams here at U of A are building truly a next generation of intelligent bionic body parts to support people with limb difference. So these are people primarily who have lost limbs, arms and hands, for instance, due to injury or illness, and use a prosthesis, an artificial limb, to live their daily life. But really, the work that we do extends to anyone who uses assistive or advanced technology to live their lives and express themselves as they want to express themselves. Here at the U of A, we are, and I say across campus, world leaders in the science and art of prosthetic restoration. We are, of course, using AI to increase the ability of people to intuitively interact with a robot directly connected to their body, but we're also changing the human body to better work with these AI-powered tools. Our teams are looking at how we can rewire the nerves of the human body to better interact with a prosthesis, and how to even attach robots directly to the bones of the human body, to attach them directly into the skeleton so a person is interacting very tightly with a robotic device. My research in particular focuses on a very special area of prosthetic and artificial limb technology, and that is building bionic body parts that can continually learn, adapt, and change together with the person using them to become more than the sum of their parts. I can say confidently that we were the first in the world to show that you could train an artificial limb kind of like you train a puppy, with like good and bad rewards. I will also say that while it doesn't chew up your slippers, it's maybe not the best way to train an artificial limb to do what you want it to do. Which brings me into some of the risks and rewards and realities of AI, one of the topics of what we're all speaking on here today. And I guess I can say that while I'm primarily maybe a researcher in artificial intelligence and rehabilitation technology, maybe I'm better thought of as someone who studies intelligence amplification, the way that one intelligence might magnify or increase the capabilities of another intelligence. So I should level set here. I'm going to, again, my fellow panelists may disagree with my definition, so I will give a definition of AI, though, and I'm going to rely on John McCarthy's definition of AI. McCarthy coined the term AI back in the 1950s and said that intelligence is the computational part of our ability to achieve goals in the world, or the ability to achieve goals in the world. So by extension, to build artificial intelligence is to build a machine that has the computational abilities to achieve goals in the world, the capabilities to achieve goals. And I want to say it's not a yes-no thing. So something is like, it's not intelligent or not intelligent. It is, in fact, isn't even something you can place on a line. Really, I would like to stress that I think, especially building on McCarthy's definition, that we should think about intelligence, especially for today's discussion, as a continuum with many different axes, some which are dependent and some which are independent of each other. One great example, I would say, if we took one of our Roombas right now, we put that back in the 1950s and gave it to someone like McCarthy, I think the reaction would be, wow, you've solved intelligence. And today someone would be like, wow, your appliance is out of date. I think that is just one way we can start to see how we place the artifacts around us on this continuum of the ability to achieve goals. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on track here. Okay, am I still? Yeah, okay. There we go. All right. So we went through that. AI is a process. I'll jump back in. AI is a process that allows us, especially in the medical domain, to transmute, and it is a magical process, to transmute information into goals. And that does that by way of decisions, either ours or the machines that support us in our daily life. So with this in mind, I'm going to jump back to two quotes from the 1960s. One is from W. Ross Ashby, which is that much like physical power and abilities, intellectual abilities can be amplified. And another is from J.C.R. Licklider. I'm going to read this quote directly, which is why I want to make sure this thing is back on track. And Licklider said in the 1960s, "The hope is that, in not too many years, human brains and computing machines will be coupled together very tightly, and that the resulting partnership will think as no human brain has ever thought and process data in a way not approached by the information handling machines we know today." So since time immemorial, we have used tools. We have adapted our tools to ourselves, and we've adapted ourselves to our tools. It's this socio-technical gyre that goes back for literally hundreds of thousands of years. People have been building tools on this very spot for many, many years before I ever came here. We're at a tipping point now. We're at a point, because of revolutions and all of the technology that supports the things we build, we can build tools that we could never build before. We can build devices that embody some of the very hallmarks of intelligence itself. We're living in that space that Licklider imagined. So I'm going to, how many of you here have cell phones? Some have smartwatches. You probably use cruise control in your cars. You probably use ChatGPT to both write and grade your essays. All of these things are possible. We'll talk about those things later on today. But I do want to say that this gets us sort of my closing point, maybe the main and central point before I invite Faith up here, is that AI is perhaps the most powerful tool we can imagine to amplify us. Boom. Yeah, that's right. Our day-to-day work, our life and our learning, our ability to push forward the frontiers of knowledge through the research we do here at the University of Alberta. And so what we do with that magnification of our innate skills, ability, our perspectives, and our goals, I say that's what's going to define the coming years for each of us individually, for the university, for Alberta, for Canada, and for the world. And I'll close by saying that I think the next 2 to 5 years are going to be very different from any we've seen before. I think they're going to be characterized by disruptive innovation on all fronts, and I think they might even begin to change what we think it means to be human. So with that, thank you very much. I think I'm even on time. And Faith, please come on up, and I'd love to hear your next perspective.
Much, Patrick. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and thanks, President Flanagan, for the opportunity. This year, as many of you know, Hollywood writers and actors embarked on a strike that has lasted for more than 5 months. The primary cause of this strike, the rise of powerful artificial intelligence models that make workers in the creative industry fear that they are going to lose their jobs to AI. Generative AI can write scripts. Generative AI can perform like actors would, using their likenesses and their voices, and without them having to be at the scene of production at all. Although generative AI may compete with human creations and win notable awards, they cannot, in most countries, be protected by copyright law. For instance, last month, the United States Copyright Office denied copyright protection for an award-winning piece of AI-created art. It was created, quote and unquote, by a human author and won the Colorado State Fair, but the US Copyright Office said, you know what, we're not going to grant copyright protection to this, even though it's similar to works created by human beings. In light of this and other developments in the realm of artificial intelligence, at least 3 questions keep me awake as an intellectual property law researcher. Should we grant copyright protection over AI-generated or AI-assisted works? How do we address the issues posed by the use of copyrighted works for training generative AI models? And how can we use copyright law to foster development of fair artificial intelligence systems? To my first question, should we grant copyright protection over AI-generated works? For over 2 centuries in copyright law, we have assumed, and with a very strong basis for that, that humans and humans alone can create works. Humans and humans alone can perform musical, literary, artistic, dramatic works. In fact, we've assumed that only humans can think and express ideas. Over 200 years of these assumptions are now being challenged. Creators and performers are no longer limited to human beings. Machines now engage in the realm that was once only known to human beings. When humans use generative AI models as a tool for creating in a way that the resultant work is a product of a significant creative exercise, you put in several prompts. In the case of Matthew Allen, whose work was denied copyright protection, he had used 624 prompts and revisions on the AI app Midjourney. In that case, where we've used human intellectual exercise to create artificial intelligence-assisted works, perhaps we should consider that investment of human labor worth compensating through copyright law. For creators and innovators, my research on artificial intelligence and intellectual property would clarify whether and how they can get intellectual property protection or intellectual property rights over their creations that are made through the assistance of AI technologies. I mean, we've always used technologies to assist us in creating works, and the use of AI technology should not be any different. But there are nuances with the use of AI technology in creating works that we have to deal with in the realm of copyright law. So while copyrighting AI-generated works may provide economic returns for the new AI-assisted creators of this generation, it raises the issue of credit, consent, and compensation for existing creators whose labor led to the materials that we use as training data for generative AI tools. And this brings me to my second question. How do we address the issues raised by the use of copyrighted works as training data for generative AI models? The training of generative AI models necessarily involve the use of copyrighted materials, and many times they are scrapped off the internet without obtaining the consent of the creators of this work, and often without crediting or compensating them in any way, and the works are used for commercial purposes. So big tech companies scrap works of small creators, use them to create artificial intelligence tools without crediting them, without compensating them in any way. So this is undue exploitation, as many of us recognize, but there is also the issue of whether enforcing prior consent for the use of copyrighted material could serve as a barrier to innovation, given the large volumes of work that is necessary to train AI models. Is it feasible or possible to get the consent of every copyright owner for the large volume of work that we would use? If we have to go through a consent procedure, would we actually be able to train AI on the diverse set of data that we need to have a fair AI system? Related to this is how the requirement of compensation could also affect the democratization of innovation. In the case of Hollywood workers, if they can produce their own films without the big corporate studios through the use of artificial intelligence, perhaps we democratize filmmaking, and the use of AI to cut down jobs and maximize profits backfires on big corporations. To my third question, can copyright law be used to foster the development of fair artificial intelligence systems? AI comes with a lot of benefits, but it also comes with a lot of risk. It could foster inequality and reinforce existing biases. In AI development, it is bias in, bias out. If the training data for the AI algorithm is not balanced and diverse, the AI system will replicate existing stereotypes and biases. And as we know, copyright law governs access and usage of data, such as images, sound, and text. So this highlights the significance of considering copyright's role in the development of fair AI systems. Now, given the large volume of data that is needed to have a very diverse data set, generative AI tool developers may begin to pick and choose, and what determines, the data sets, that the data they decide to put in their data set and the one they decide to leave out. They may choose to rely on works that are in the public domain, that's works in which copyrights have already expired. Now, these works may not capture the realities of today or may reflect the biases of the past. For instance, they may use limited photographs of women or women of color where this should not be the case. This makes it very important for us to carefully consider the impact that copyright rules could potentially have on the fairness of AI. Now, these three questions: should we grant copyright protection over AI-generated works? How do we address the issues posed by the use of copyrighted works for training generative AI models? And how can we ensure that copyright law is used to foster the development of fair AI systems? Are all issues that I'm engaging with in my research, and they are hard questions that must be carefully navigated in the best interest of all. But never mind, ChatGPT has already made up its mind on all of these questions, while I am still doing some soul searching and library digging. So to finish, I see the rewards of AI while also acknowledging the significant risk attached to it. The reality, however, is that AI has come to stay, and it has already penetrated virtually every sector. It now behoves us to regulate the use and deployment of AI in an ethical, responsible, and well-being enhancing manner. This is the overarching theme of my work on copyright and generative AI tools. The fact that something is possible does not mean that we should do it. For instance, we should not, through the use of artificial intelligence tools, take away fundamental human rights, including the dignity of people. They should remain inalienable even in an AI-powered world. Neither should we use artificial intelligence to reinforce harmful biases. We must regulate AI in a way that protects our well-being. As the Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz said, unfettered innovation does not lead to the general well-being of our society. Thank you very much. I'll now invite Martha.
That was amazing. All right, my mic is working. All right, I'm going to keep this quite a bit shorter and get to the panel sooner. So first, it's wonderful to be here. I'm very excited to be on this panel and hear all these interesting opinions. So I'll tell you a little bit about what my research area is, and then tell you a little bit about my opinion on AI risks and rewards, and then we'll get right to the panel. So my area of research is reinforcement learning. This is an area of machine learning that's focused on automatic decision making. So the two key words there are decision making. Patrick nicely explained decision making, but a key thing there is that it's all about having an agent or a system that takes actions in the world. So it does control or makes decisions. And the other part that's important in here is the word automatic. So automatic means that the agent is actively engaging in the world and learning about the world. So these two things make it a little bit different than most machine learning systems, which are much more about learning passively from large data sets. So think about speech recognition, or think about ChatGPT, which is essentially being trained on all the internet. So a huge, huge data set. So in reinforcement learning is a little bit different. There, the agent is going to actively interact with the world so that it can learn more about the world. So you should think a little bit about how we interact with the world. You know, we go beyond just having books handed to us to learn from the world. We'll actually go and we'll try things. We'll have experiential knowledge. You can think also of the sciences, where we're going to do little experiments to understand our world better. So that's what a reinforced learning agent should be doing as well. So I'll give you a little example. Imagine you have a thermostat in your house, and you are going to be monitoring all the data from that thermostat for a year. So you'll look at time of year, you'll look at what you've set the temperature to, and you look at how much energy that you have used. So a traditional machine learning system might try to do predictions with that data. It'll take that data and it'll say, given this temperature, given this time of year, this is how much energy I think is going to be used. Now, a reinforcement learning system is going to go one step beyond that and ask, how can I change how the temperature is set to try to reduce how much energy is used? Okay? And in order to do that, it might have to go beyond the data you have given it. It might want to actually try increasing or decreasing temperature and seeing how that impacts your energy. And over time, it's going to start making you use less and less energy until it gets to a pretty good control strategy, right? And that's actually one of the big things that I do in my group. I care a lot about asking how can we make our systems more efficient and how can we make them more sustainable. And I think there's a really big opportunity right now to make our systems smarter. And one of the reasons I think that we have such a big opportunity is that people are very good high-level decision makers. They're really good at what we think of as common sense decision making, but they're not so good at low-level control. Things like changing pump speeds continuously every second. That's not something that we're good at, nor is it something that we're very interested in. So what you find is a lot of static systems across the world. You'll see, again, even just heating and cooling in buildings or drinking water treatment, which is an area that I work on. A lot of those systems are quite static. Parameters are set statically for things like pump speeds. And so that is some place where AI can come in and can make our systems more efficient. It's a benefit for all of us because rather than replacing what we are doing, it is going to take our current systems and it's just going to make them better. So it's a win-win. I feel like this is cutting in, out, and out a little bit. It's all right? All right, that leads me a little bit into the AI risks and rewards. So the AI setting that I'm thinking about is very much on the benefit side. I want to understand how can we make our systems more sustainable. I think many people in this room would not be too worried about having smarter systems, smarter heating and cooling systems, systems that just run more sustainably. So I think when we're talking about AI risks and rewards, we're talking a lot more about losing jobs, so losing jobs to automation, and also asking what happens when we take bad actors and we give them this new and more powerful tool. So that's something that I'm going to want to talk a bit more about on this panel, these two risks. And there's so many awesome questions that you guys have submitted and that I believe Bill is going to ask us, so I'm not going to say much more about it, but I'm going to say one thing that I think is important to keep in mind, and that we often talk about the dangers of AI, but there really is two axes here to keep in mind. And this is sort of an obvious point, but I think it warrants being said, that we have the AI tools, but we also, of course, have how we use those tools, and any technology can be misused. So we always have to keep in mind, how are we going to have a fair and just society with or without AI systems? And I think a lot of our answers are going to be the same, regardless of whether we're talking about having AI or not having AI. And additionally, we've had the question of automation around for a long time. And AI and automation are quite related to each other. It's just that we haven't had the same kind of existential angst about automation that we have about artificial intelligence. But a lot of the same questions actually arise there too. So I hope that we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Okay, with that, I'll hand it back to Bill.
So, Bill, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, grab a seat. Well, thank you, everyone. That I think is a great start to our conversation. And so I thought I'd start with, we'd talk about the risks, the rewards, and the realities. So let's start with the risks, which I'm sure is on all of our minds. And famously, I was at, several months ago, a number of famous people in the world signed that there needs to be a 6-month moratorium. This is all moving too quickly. I don't know that much came of this moratorium. I don't know any cessation of research happening at U of A. But what are your thoughts? Is the advances on AI moving too quickly? Is it something that we should be worried about? Faith, why don't we start with you?
Thank you for that question. I don't think we are moving too fast. I think in terms of regulation, we are not moving fast enough. So it's a question of regulation not catching up with the development of AI, and that's where we should be speeding up on. Like I said, AI has come to stay, and we would continue to see the developments in AI. We can't put a stop to it at this rate, but we can actually choose how we regulate it. What are the ethical values that are going to guide how we develop AI? How can we be more responsible in the way we develop and also even use AI? Because like Martha said, human beings are the ones using AI. So if it's a tool that could be neutral, depending on how we decide to use it.
Thank you. Patrick.
Thanks. I honestly don't know if we have a choice as to whether we speed up or slow down the development of AI. If I'm like, hey, like Martha, would you like to answer 700% less email in a day? with this one easy trick, Martha's gonna be like, yeah, I don't know, maybe Martha wouldn't. I would so totally say, yeah, I would love to have this piece of automation that will increase my ability to do the things that I find meaningful and not do the things I don't find meaningful. And so I think because we're seeing a lot of centralization, I think, in AI right now, where major players, companies, and or institutions are holding sort of the reins on the tools, but at the same time, there's this grassroots footprint of more accessible technology that's popping up everywhere. People are going to grab that, whether or not they have access to those large monolithic systems or all of those other systems that'll start to proliferate the world, they're going to start using them. So then the question is, do we speed up or slow down our active prospection? How much forethought we put in as a society, and how many good conversations and dialogues we initiate in to start thinking about what that's going to mean. But I don't actually think we have much control on the knob of speeding up or slowing down. Pause ChatGPT for 4. 5 is already built, or 6 is already built. You can't pause something that's already built. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Martha.
I don't have much to add to that. I think those are really good points. But I do think sometimes there's a distinction between pausing research in universities and what I think people really mean, which is pausing the development of big tools that are released out by companies. I also think that is a little bit difficult to pause. Maybe I'll add one thing, is that I feel like there is a sense of panic around the question of should we pause, should we slow down, should we speed up? And there's almost never good decision making in the face of panic. So.
Yes. So one thing I'm curious to get your thoughts. Rich and I've had many conversations with Rich about artificial general intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. And we've talked about the application of artificial intelligence in particular tasks. And I was listening to a podcast the other day with one of the founders of DeepMind, and he was talking about artificial general intelligence as being something like creating your own executive assistant who can manage your life and do an endless array of things. And so I'm just wondering your thoughts on this. How close are we to developing something like artificial general intelligence? And how different is that from the work that you're working on? And what is artificial general intelligence? And is there some things that AI will never be able to do that only humans can do? Easy questions.
Sure, I'll jump in.
I know Rich has answers to these questions.
I guess that I think artificial general intelligence and artificial intelligence, I'm not sure there's a particular need to add in the word general intelligence there.
Okay.
But I do think that what we do want is more general purpose systems so that we don't have to keep developing very specialized solutions. Yes. General purpose solutions are a good thing, but it's unlikely that they'll become so general purpose that they are, encompass all the problems. There's always going to have to be some specialization to problems. Now, if we go all the way to having a personal assistant versus, let's say, something that, a Roomba, at some point I do think we start asking, can we recreate an intelligent being that then we can control to do whatever we would like to do? And I'm starting to get uncomfortable with the ethical implications of that extreme over here. So I like to think of artificial intelligence as something that's going to help us optimize our systems, empower us to do better decision making. And I don't think we're anywhere close to this end anyway, so I'm perfectly comfortable asking, how can we leverage general purpose tools today to be better?
Yeah, so you're not worried about that executive assistant getting out of
I'm
control.
not actually, I'm personally not worried about it.
Faith.
I mean, when I think of artificial general intelligence, I think of, a system that has multiple intelligences, like a human being. As a human being, you're not just intellectually, quote unquote, intelligent, you have spatial intelligence, you have linguistic intelligence, and when we say a person is not intelligent, oftentimes we mean they are not intelligent in a particular area, but they may be intelligent in another area. So the question is, are we going to have an artificial intelligence system that would be able to combine all the multifaceted dimensions of intelligence that we possess as human beings? And I don't think so. I mean, take the example of an executive assistant, an artificial intelligence executive assistant. Maybe the person or the system now could be intelligent in that way, but for me as a professor, I am a professor, and then I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, so those are different levels that interact as a person and comes with different intelligences that I don't think we would be able to put in one system.
Thank you. Patrick.
Cool. Whenever someone brings up artificial general intelligence, I really like to try to go back in my head and okay, let's take away all the terminology and go back to that sort of all of the different axes that you both brought up when you were speaking, that like, just to think about where a system lives, if you make it into a radar plot, people who know me know I love radar plots as a way to present information. You have like all these axes and you sort of see where the envelope is of the capabilities or the properties of the thing you're studying. And I like to say, okay, let's tear away AGI and just think about where is this system in terms of all of those capabilities. And what people I think mean by AGI and our approach to it is that that plot, that envelope, extends and extends until on every single one of those axes, we're getting to where people might be on that particular axis. Now, then we get to like, what are we building? And Rich, I'm going to go back to one of the things that Rich brought up recently as well, which is, are you building tools or are you building people? If you're building people and you're setting out to build people, then you should do that, and you should think about it. This isn't Rich's words, I'm going to layer this on here. You should think about that kind of intelligence differently than you might think about human intelligence. That's okay. Dolphin intelligence is probably way better than our intelligence anyway, and we don't try to map those two things onto each other, but both have different properties and different ways of achieving goals in the world through acts of computation. So I think that when you say, will it ever do all the things that a human does? Well, I mean, I don't know if that's the question we should be asking. But if we are asking that question, that's my final point here, is that, I mean, we're slowly eroding the line between us and the technology and tools. If we're thinking about tool AI, not people AI, we're thinking about the tools we're using. That line between us and our tools is constantly becoming more and more fuzzy. And so then, will we have systems that heavily incorporate AI, that are able to do everything a human does and more? Well, yeah, because it's going to be us. And I think that's a very, very spicy and interesting case to think about.
Well, now I'd like to bring it close to home, and that is AI in education and universities and what we all do, teaching and research, and particularly the teaching and the student experience. What do you think will be the implication of AI? We have, of course, seen ChatGPT, and we're wrestling with this, but my sense is that's just the tip of the iceberg of how it's going to transform educational experiences for students. And how can we as a university be at the cutting edge of that? Patrick, let's start with you.
Sure, I've actually thought a lot about this. I've been going and talking to, especially K-12 educators and thinking what this really means for education at all levels, especially university. I'll distill it down to 3 points, and I'll try to be brief for once in my life. One is that I think we're going to see a shift in education from core facts to meta skills. I think we're going to see that as a very natural transition. A second point is I think we're going to see a dramatically inverted power dynamic between instructors and students. The instructors can no longer feel that they are the sage on a stage, expert in an area. The students will likely know more about them, and they have to adapt their mentorship and teaching skills to that inverted power dynamic. And the third is I think we're going to see radically different pathways from training to deployment. Right now, we go through a series of structured educational exercises to get out into the workforce. I think people are just going to start ignoring that and going around it. So we have to respect and understand those altered pathways from training to actual use of skills and start to adapt to that and celebrate that and really jump on board.
Great, thank you. Faith.
Yeah, thank you for that question. One, I've thought of whether, AI systems will replace us as professors, and I think I've concluded that if our job is just to provide knowledge and to provide information, perhaps AI systems might replace us, but I've had time to reflect on my role as a teacher and think about the fact that I don't just provide information to my students, I also help in the development of their personality. So as a law teacher, I help my students to think about how to be ethical lawyers and how to think about what kind of lawyer they would like to be. So to that extent, I don't think AI would replace me as a teacher. I have also thought about, teachers and teaching from kindergarten to year 12, and also how they are so integral into the formation of the personality of students and how we can't replace what they do through a machine and all of that. But I have also thought about, the opportunities that AI presents to us as educators, and I've thought about even from the perspective of persons with disabilities, which is a theme that I also look at in my work, how copyright law affects, opportunities, access opportunities for persons with disabilities, and I have seen that artificial intelligence can be used to support learning experiences of persons with disabilities, and that's a huge reward that we can take away from artificial intelligence in education. And so I think there are rewards, that are connected to the use of artificial intelligence in education. And I think also one thing we should be thinking about is the kind of education we provide. How does that change? So some of the jobs that, our students are going to be doing in the next 3 to 5 years or 10 years perhaps do not exist today. So what do they need in those jobs? Do they just need information, or are there particular skills that we should be developing in those students to make them equipped for even the jobs that do not exist today?
Thank you.
Those are such complete answers. Maybe I'll just touch on the one implied question in there, which is maybe about cheating a little bit. I'm not sure if that's part of the question.
Yeah.
I do feel like as educators, even since we've had the internet, we've had a hard time understanding how do we control what happens outside of the classroom and what students are accessing. And I don't think we've even solved it yet for the internet, let alone ChatGPT. But we have more learning to do about how to educate.
Yes. And one thing, I can do a little plug for a new course that we're going to be offering at the University of Alberta, all called AI Everywhere. And one of our colleagues is right here who is designing this course. And this is a course that's going to be available online and available to any student at U of A who wishes to take it. And one of the things that we were thinking about and talking with my colleagues and working in the field is I thought this is a field that's going to affect all of our lives, personal and professional. And we want our students equipped with some kind of understanding, some kind of literacy around AI and how it's going to impact our lives. And so we thought the U of A should be on the forefront of offering this to our students. And so we'll be launching this in January, and it'll be part of a larger certificate. And so you can do your degree in law or health sciences or engineering, whatever it might be, and you can at the same time dig in very deeply into some of the issues that we're talking about today. So I'm very proud of that, and thank you for taking the lead on that. So one thing that we've seen with the technological developments in the last several decades is in some ways they've increased wealth inequality in the world. And we see these massive technology companies that have become enormously influential, the Metas, the Googles, and in some regard driving greater wealth inequality in society. What do you think the impact of AI will be? Is it going to drive even greater wealth inequality, or does AI actually hold some potential to democratize the creation of wealth in a way that some other technologies have not? Martha, let's begin with you.
Wow, it's a broad-ranging question, but I think yes, likely. Any new tool that is going to make it more possible, for example, to add more automation. It also makes it so that whenever you have very large data sets and are the person who's gathering the data, you're going to have a little extra power with that tool, is likely going to cause extra inequality. But at the same time, I feel like, again, as a society, we need to deal with this question. I've had needed to deal with it for maybe the last 30 years. So I assume at some point we will start dealing with it at a societal level. And I have no answers for how we should deal with it at a societal level.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is also disruption, job disruption, and what is the impact of that on wealth inequality. And I think we're looking at the potential massive disruption in the workplace. But yeah, Faith, your thoughts?
Yes, I think we're going to see just job disruptions, and I think that could potentially lead to broaden the existing inequality that we have in society. And I think that perhaps the most vulnerable and people who are in low-earning jobs are going to be the most affected, whereas people in high-paying jobs may actually be the ones that are able to leverage intellectual property to actually maximize and increase their wealth. So what should we be doing about it? I think there is a place for regulation in terms of how do we ensure that businesses do not replace human beings, even in situations where they don't necessarily have to replace people, but they've decided to replace people just to maximize profit. Maybe you can still keep some jobs. So how do we become even more sensitive to the society that we live in? So do I really have to, retire all my workforce because ChatGPT can generate, text, and all that they do is to write for me? Or can I actually use ChatGPT in a way that also allows, the people that work for me to be able to use that tools to increase their own creativity. So I could use generative AI to support rather than replace jobs. So that's something we should be thinking about. Perhaps we have to think about maybe even reducing our working week and thinking about maybe a 30-hour working week and think about
Our
what that
students
means.
will like that.
What that means for our well-being, because perhaps if we replace working week, we can keep, job on a broader basis and everyone has their job, but then the working hours for everyone is reduced, but in a way that also means that, the income that we are taking home is not reduced because AI is not reducing profit, it's increasing profit, and so it's all about distributing policies, distribution policies, and what we should be doing in terms of distributing or redistributing wealth, which, as Martha said, is an issue we've grappled with as a society for years. So these are not new issues that are coming to light. They are issues that we've not really dealt with and we should be dealing with.
I just want to add one thing to
Yes.
that, actually, is that I feel like one of our solutions is not to prevent the automation. Like, we should embrace all the technology to make ourselves as efficient as possible, but we should ask why the wealth is not being redistributed. Like, it's not that we have not enough work. I mean, I think we all agree we'd like to have more teachers and nurses and all those other jobs that we're just not spending our money on. So I'm a proponent of use the automation, but also think about how to have a healthy society where we're paying for jobs.
Patrick.
Cool. I should just say, yes, I agree. I'll chip in a little bit, and my first reaction when we think about how wealth is distributed is, how long do we think our current models of wealth are going to be the future models of wealth? Right now, we have a variety of floating currencies, and some people like to keep precious metals in vaults and places underground somewhere and guarded with lots of barbed wire. But is that going to be the thing that is still the steady state in the next 10 years? Is that true in the next 5 years? Is it who has the most supercomputer clusters in a big warehouse somewhere? Is it who has the most personal computing devices? Is it who can mine the most Bitcoin? Is it who has the most data that is precious and special that you can't just scrape off the internet? And so I don't actually know what the wealth of the future is going to look like. And so this question is very interesting because how is that distributed might change, in fact, overnight. If we think about groups coming together and federating their data, networks of people who trust each other enough to collect their shared resources together, that could be very, very powerful, and that might be a very different distribution of what we would consider the wealth of the future that might transform things as we know it very, very quickly. In terms of the short term in jobs, I do reflect, there's thinkers like Geordie Rose who've come and said outright that there are tens of millions of unfilled jobs that people just aren't doing. And so there is a niche segment, which is jobs that people are not filling and don't want to fill, that can be filled by automation and create, I think, positive movement into places where we can use, like both Martha and Faye said, use technology to enhance the creativity and the capacity of individuals in what they do. Maybe also with a 3-day work week or something. Yeah.
I think they've been talking about that since like the 1800s or something. Right. I don't know if that's coming.
Do I hear two, one, half-day work week? All right, good.
Every technological advance was supposed to give us more time, and
Yeah,
it just seems
exactly.
to eat up more of our time. Email being the worst offender. I'd now like to turn to some of the audience questions. And can the panel speak to how personal or sometimes unconscious biases impact the development of devices and tools that leverage AI? For example, a medical device might fail due to bias in design, such as pulse oximeters not working properly for those with melanated skin, etc. So, and who would? Any thought? It's a medical device guy. Sure. Over to you.
I'm
over to you, Patrick.
Thanks. I love this question.
And you've got the answer to this question.
I'm actually going to flip it because I think we do often talk about bias in AI quite rightly, and we should think very, very hard about it. There are cases where we should celebrate the bias of our learning systems. Now everyone's going to hold me to that and say I'm saying something really quite offensive, but I'm not. If we think about, for instance, a assistive device that is one person's assistive device, it works with them every day. I think we hope that that system will in fact be able to overfit to that individual, to become specialized to what they need, how they live their lives. If I think about a powered wheelchair, an artificial limb, an exoskeleton, various implants that allow people to see and hear, I think we hope that those are going to bias themselves to their specific users to not just be okay for that user, but to get better over time as that person and their life and their needs evolve. And so I do think that there is a very important role to think about how we are looking at the distribution of bias in our systems. I think there are niche times when we actually want to make sure our system can actually specialize to an individual so it can be their form of amplification, not a one-size-fits-all solution for all of society, which is, as we all know, is like the hole in a donut.
Did you want to comment?
Sure, I'll add
Yeah.
to that I feel like there is a group of researchers who are asking, how can I take data and try to overcome some of the biases in the data? So we can all hope that those researchers make good progress on that. And otherwise, I think my other hope is that there is at least an alignment here. Companies or whoever's training these models should want to have models that are not biased, because biased models are inaccurate models. And so they should have an incentive to try to make these become more accurate. So that's my hope.
Faith, anything to add?
Yeah. In terms of bias, I think there are two sides to the coin. Like Patrick said, there are helpful biases, like we've seen with the work that Patrick do. Even in education, there are AI tools that provide individualized education that help people to learn in the way that would help them to build the capabilities that they need to be and do what they want to be. But we also have harmful biases, and we can't close our eyes to the realities of harmful biases. And I think one of the causes of harmful biases that we're beginning to see in AI tools is the fact that we don't have balanced and diverse data sets. And it's also a question of the AI developers and the team of developers looking into AI, whether they are also reflecting their own internal biases in the data sets that they collect or create, and also even in the preloading rules that are used to label the data sets. So I feel like what we currently have in terms of the biases we are seeing in AI is a reflection of the biases that we hold as individuals, because we are the ones creating the data sets. We are the ones labeling the data set. So it's a reflection of what we've not been able to achieve as a society, that we've not been able to eliminate bias as a society. And we should be thinking of how we can eliminate biases as a society. It may be in terms of having a more diverse AI programming team. Because if you have a more diverse team, then everyone brings different opinions, and then you can create a balanced team. And so, again, it's about us as individuals, as human beings, to say, how do we address the innate biases that we've kind of grown up with, and then affects the way people, the way AI make recommendations or decisions that harm people. Yeah.
Thank you. I like this question because it's a very practical one, and I'm sure on all of our minds. So how will AI change the average household? And Patrick, you said 2 to 5 years, we're going to see huge changes in our lives. So give me a concrete example of how is it going to change the average house?
Did you say 2 to 5 years?
Well, yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah. Well, Patrick said everything's going to happen in 2 to 5 years.
Fine, I'm going to jump in. I will address it.
I'm
In
putting
2
you
to
on the
5
spot here.
years,
2
you
to
will
5
have
years.
the COO of your household. It will be automated, and it will do a lot of the
Sorry?
the COO of your household, the chief
Okay.
operating officer, the executive assistant of your household.
Oh.
I
need one of those.
I know, me too. And I think in 2 to 5 years, we run our house pretty well, actually. I think, but imagine that is actually within striking distance. I think it is very much a tractable reality that you could have, the average household could in fact have not a butler that goes and cleans the stuff. It's not the Jetsons or something. But I do think that we can get to a point where you do have, at least in terms of the digital footprint of the house, a chief executive or operating officer that's going to help that house run really smoothly and coordinate everything from shipping and receiving to getting new stuff to other day-to-day tasks like making sure the thermostat's working.
So give me an example of what the COO is doing, like stocking the fridge, or
That sounds great. I think about all the things that come to my door in various
reminding
brown
you
boxes, and
you need to get more milk, or
right.
Tell
Save-On
me.
just drops off a box, or you pick your favorite grocery
Right.
store.
Right.
Hopefully, it's cheaper by then.
Right. How long? 2 years, did you say?
2 to 5 years.
Put me on the list.
5 years is a short timeline, but maybe
Yeah.
maybe a lot of the changes will be sort of hidden changes. So the thing I talked about is saying our systems are going to become more efficient. In some sense, that's the easiest change to make, rather than suddenly having fridges that have cameras on them that can look inside the fridge. Like those are going to take a bit longer,
Yes.
but maybe it is going to be easier to make our systems more efficient. Maybe the lights could turn off on their own. There'll also be probably a bunch of hidden changes in our software systems as well. Like you'll interact with your email every day. Maybe Gmail or maybe whatever email client you use is going to have better systems for adding things to your to-do list. Like certain things will be optimized
Google will
behind the
improve?
scenes.
I hope so.
Maybe. So I imagine there'll be a lot of efficiency improvements that are sort of more hidden.
Yes. And this would also have implications for energy conservation.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think energy
Which is
conservation is going to be a big
highly
thing.
topical.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it's one of those things where once we start trying to do something about it, we will make a big impact, and I think we
Yes.
just haven't been trying very hard.
Yes. Yes. Hey.
I think we would have more automated households. I think maybe to be tricky, we would have less fights. So things that I would say, go check the fridge for me to see if we have enough meat. I could just do that on my phone, and no one has to go downstairs to check the fridge. So I think generally we would have more automated households, and perhaps we would have more energy efficient households, because we also have to think about the energy implications of AI, and even how we develop it, we can make it energy efficient, but it can also be energy inefficient. So, what's it?
Yes.
Can I just chime in a little bit more? To broaden the definition of household, including the work life and the outside of work life, I think we will actually see dramatic changes as well in how people balance their lives. We talked about the shorter work week and things like that, but I do think we'll see different distributions for the average household in where people are spending their time and what they're spending it on. And I think some of those are going to be very noteworthy, and they'll probably be within 2 to 5 years.
Great. I'm going to hold you to it.
Please do.
Another question, I think, also very much on our minds. There are concerns around AI about consent and false information due to deep fakes. And I think this is something that I was thinking about when I was listening to that podcast I mentioned, and the use of an artificial intelligent executive assistant. And what if you told your executive assistant to do something that was malicious? I want you to destroy an individual's reputation by creating all of this fake imagery and videos, and then developing a whole launch of this through social media, and just like within minutes destroying this individual's reputation. What are your thoughts about that, and how can we counter this? And can AI actually be useful to address this kind of concern?
I'll start. So I think we all know that AI can be used, to create deepfakes, to spread, false truths, and sometimes it's actually very difficult for us to recognize what's a real image and what's, a deep fake. And so I think first we would have to retrain ourselves. In an AI world, we would have to learn how to recognize deep fakes from, original pictures. That's something we are still trying to learn. It's becoming more difficult as AI gets more sophisticated to determine what's real and what's not real. And I do see, the harmful effects of deepfakes. I was reading this morning on BBC how, some loaning agencies in India are using deepfakes to create nudes of people who are owing them money, and a lot of people are committing suicide as a result. So those are harmful realities that we are seeing today. And I think it's going to be a lot of training us, to know how to recognize deepfakes from those that are not. But also in terms of, we are also going to have to do a lot of work in terms of even monitoring tools that are out there. And it's, again, a regulation issue of trying to pull down tools that, are causing harmful effects. I don't think we can necessarily stop people from doing it the same way we cannot stop people from committing offenses, the same way we cannot stop people from doing harmful things, but we can kind of regulate it and eliminate that, or maybe even deter that in the kind of regulation that we put in place. we should be putting laws in place for people engaging in this kind of acts, not just civil actions, but also criminal actions should be possible to be taken against people behind all of this. Yeah.
Thank you.
I wonder if one of the things that might happen is that we're going to move a little bit more towards trusting each other and experts, have a web of trust. Right now, I have a tendency to go to Google and type in a question and try to get an answer to my question by searching all the internet. And already that is not working very well. There's just a lot of incorrect articles out there. And so then I might email someone instead that I know and say, hey, do you know the answer to my question? So obviously that's too onerous. But I could imagine that as we go forward, there'll be almost a certification where you will go query a network of people that have put together information that is trustworthy. And unless you're looking at that information, you're not just going to trust all the information that's out there. So almost ironically, I feel like we're going to move more towards expertise and the importance of people knowing what is actually true and what is not true so that we can live in this world where it will be hard to recognize if something is false or not false if you are not an expert in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to get people to trust it. And that's a challenge in our world where people are not trusting of experts. And
Right, yeah, so
Yeah.
I was saying it's kind of, in some sense, a little ironic. We have to move back to trusting people and not just the internet.
yes, yes. Patrick.
I love the idea of networks of trust, and I think this is really where we need to spend a lot of attention. I agree with you 100%, Martha, as always. And I think we do this already with some of our technology. We're like, hey, we have young children. We look for like organizations that certify like, yeah, parents, you can trust this toy that not choke your child, or you can trust this data stream, like this video stream, to include only content that's appropriate for your child. We already look to bodies, both like regulated bodies and also independent bodies, to help us certify and trust the things we engage with. This is an old thing, but it also is something that our tools can accentuate and improve. Thinking of using AI watermarking and other technologies to help to verify the quality of the content. I think one of the big answers in building the networks of trust as well, though, is that we have to do something really challenging, which is rectify the inequities in the data sphere. So if we think about our globe as a giant ball filled with information, and you look at where the hotspots are, there's only certain segments of our entire global population which can contribute to our global data, essentially this reserve of data that we all pull from. And so that means also people have a much more comprehensive ability to control what we see coming in and out of that. So I think as we start to see more equitable contributions to that data sphere from all around the world, we're going to see the ability to build some of those trust networks that Martha, you were mentioning, and start to build better AI tooling to help us broker and facilitate that. We have a goal. Our goal is to build trust networks. We can deploy our tools to help actually do that in a principled way. But it does require this bigger thing, which is increasing data equity across the globe. I don't know how to do that.
So another question here is about AI in health and healthcare. And I think this is, again, probably a question that many of us are thinking about. How is it going to impact our own healthcare? And how are we going to see that, and how in the delivery of health? And what might be the implications for healthcare professionals? And do they need to seek additional training as AI starts to have an impact on the delivery of health? Do they need to be taking AI everywhere?
Yes.
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 I'm very excited so I don't work in health, but I'm very excited for the future of health, where I'm sure everyone's heard the term precision health, but I feel like right now we have statistical health. Like we look at bodies of people and we say, on average, this has worked, so I'm going to make that your treatment. I would much more prefer to have treatments conditioned on all my information. So I'm looking forward to a future where there's lots of sensors, I'm constantly being monitored, and I have personalized health information. That would be amazing.
Yes, and AI can drive that so that
Yes,
the healthcare
the precision part
that
is the
you
AI part.
receive is tailored to you specifically.
That's right,
Yes.
that's right.
Like this intervention might work for you that might not work for another person.
Right, yes.
I'm also not in healthcare, but I would like to see more individualized healthcare. I'm not sure if I want to be monitored. I mean, I think it's going to depend
It's all
on...
about data.
I want to be monitored.
Yeah, of course. Like, you would have to use data to personalize healthcare. But I think that our comfort level will also depend on where we are. So if I'm hailing, of course, I want you to monitor me, and I want that personalized health. But at the time when I'm in good health, I'm like, maybe I don't want you collecting my data right now.
was just thinking, I can do an EKG of myself right now in like 30 seconds on my watch.
Yeah, me too.
I love that. But so this is quite neat. Like, we are living in a special time where we can take more autonomy and ownership over our own personal health. We can control more of that process, and we can have more involvement on a day-to-day basis. So I think that this is something that AI tooling is allowing. Like, I don't know how Apple made these watches. I don't know if they just have really great sensors. My guess is they have actually fairly mediocre sensors, and they're using advanced computing technology and AI technologies to be able to get accurate EKGs or ECGs out of that really rudimentary sensor where my finger can bounce all over the place. So I feel like that's a really special thing. When I think about the impact on healthcare, I usually try to break it apart into 3 pieces. One is that AI systems or advanced computing technologies in healthcare can help with generalization, understanding patterns in whole populations of people. I can think it helps in personalization, how we can start to understand any given individual, and then optimization, how I might work with my smartwatch every day to actually change the treatments or the procedures or my day-to-day health routines. So I think on all those levels, we're going to see improvements and increasing speed in deployment. If I have a healthcare practitioner who sees me and I have a condition, and he's only seen or she's only seen one condition like this in their entire career, and you tell me, hey, practitioner, cool, you can either A, treat me based on that one case you've seen, or B, call a friend. Your AI assistant is going to tell you, hey, in all the other cases that look like this all across the globe, in cases that match this one, this is what the outcomes were, so here's your options, pick from this menu. Like, I hope the practitioner chooses the augmented and amplified version of their care pathway, and not the, well, I've seen this once, let's flip a coin. As a patient, I really hope it's the other one.
So Faith, I'd like to pick up on your point about being monitored. And AI does enormously enhance society's ability to track individuals and invade privacy. And I think, you read that China is very advanced on this now in terms of its ability to very broad surveillance within China. So I'm just curious, your thoughts on using AI for those purposes, and how can we guard privacy in that context?
I think we're always going to be trying to strike a balance. Already, even pre-AI world, we are always trying to strike a balance between privacy protection and public interest. So if we're using surveillance technologies, say, for the purpose of enhancing human safety, some people may be like, I don't mind a little bit of surveillance if I'm going to be protected, but I don't want you coming into my homes and, putting surveillance technologies everywhere. So it's always going to be a balance, and we are going to be balancing different interests, the private interest of a particular person, but also the overall public interest in using those technologies. Of course, we should be guided by fundamental human rights, and also, I think in societies where surveillance technologies have been misused, in societies where even human rights are not being protected or not being adequately protected. So I think a lot would depend on our continued protection of human rights and our continued regard of human rights as inalienable, and us trying as much as possible to balance, individual rights as against public rights or public interest.
Thank you. Patrick, Martha?
I don't think there's much more to add to that.
Yeah.
It can definitely has been used very evilly, and I like the point that it is about human rights and in settings where human rights are being violated.
It's interesting to ask who's doing the surveilling. And this is, I think, we often think about centralized surveillance or using AI tools to increase the ability of some centralized organization to process massive amount of information. But we can also imagine, hey, you've got security cameras outside your house, and it'd be really awesome if the automated solution was able to tell you, hey, someone's breaking into your car right now, you should probably do something about that, or maybe we'll call the authorities. So I think it is interesting to think the degree to which, again, the automation allows more autonomy and control over the environment for the individual by leveraging the same tools that might be deployed in a centralized fashion. So I think that's an interesting trade-off as well, because I think most folks are probably like, yeah, I would love it if, my watch told me someone's breaking into your car, or, oh, hey, this important thing is happening in the area around your home. I think we all saw as well the failure to date so far of like smart glasses with cameras on them. That is totally flopped, and that would be a very potentially federated approach to surveillance where everyone's able to monitor their own environment and to hold others in that environment accountable. That sounds kind of interesting. It sounds like it could change power balances, but so far that seems to keep flopping. No one gets smart glasses.
Yes. So a final question here, and Faith, I'm sure you'll be interested in this one. In terms of the everyday person, what can we do to safeguard creative human efforts such as fine art, writing for entertainment purposes, novels, screenplays, and other intellectual property? Should we not be using OpenAI products? Because I understand OpenAI products go in and steal things all over the place without attribution, and the creators are in no way recognized or compensated for their creation.
Yes, that's a big question. So should we not use OpenAI tools? I would say we should continue to use OpenAI tools, but depends on the extent to which we use those tools. So we shouldn't use OpenAI tools to replace human creators because there are already works in existence. People would continue to create works, and we should be mindful of the fact that without the creations of human creators, there would be no generative AI because human creators, generative AI is trained on the pre-existing materials that are created by human authors. Now, there are two sides to intellectual property protection. We want to be able to protect the interest of authors, but in Canada, a second objective of intellectual property is also to actually disseminate that knowledge and give people even the power to use that to create new knowledge. So people are using generative AI tools also to assist their own creativity and to create new knowledge. And I think what we should be dealing with is how do we ensure that, we attribute correctly? How do we ensure that we regulate this internet scrapping of people's works? How do we regulate intellectual property thefts in an era of artificial intelligence? So those are issues that we should be dealing with because this is, maybe it's on a larger scale, but it's also similar to a situation where maybe I steal somebody's work without even buying it and then use that to create my own work and not credit them. So it's happening outside the AI world, and it's happening in the AI world. The question is, how do we monitor intellectual property theft in an AI world, and how do we ensure that creators get compensated for the use of their work in training artificial intelligence systems? So I think it's a question of how do we compensate, how do we set up a consent system, whether we even need a consent system or whether we should be using a credit system and things like that.
And maybe AI could be used to monitor and drive that, because it would be hard to otherwise identify when you've been scooping this stuff all over the world. Where is it coming from?
That's right.
Patrick?
Yeah, I'll give Martha the last word. Martha should have last word.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask, since you say it is sort of related to how we currently do have to deal with these issues. Someone could already go look at someone's painting, for example, and then mimic it almost exactly, and of course that would be a violation.
Yes.
So is there a question right now for these systems about how similar, like if someone goes through the process of using these tools and then creates art, and that art now looks somewhat similar to previous art, is that how people are actually asking how we're going to check if there's been theft or not theft?
So right now we deal with the issue of copyright infringement even in an AI world, the way we deal it in before AI world. So if a work is similar to an existing work, we would say there is copyright infringement. But there are situations where AI generates a work that is not substantially similar because there is a threshold of similarity that you would have to cross to be able for us to say you're liable for copyright infringement. So when AI is smart and does not cross that threshold, we may not actually know that, Martha's work has been used to develop this particular AI tool. So if I don't know that my work has been used, then I don't even sue the AI company for using the work without my consent. So it's whether we would even be able to know. But if we're able to know in the sense that, it's substantially similar, then that would amount to copyright infringement. And maybe we should think about the fact that if it's not substantially similar, maybe we treat the AI tool the same way we treat a human person, that I can use an existing work to develop a new idea and I won't be liable for copyright infringement.
I'd love to, Faith, I have a question for you again. So like, if we decouple the wealth generation from the creative process, what does that change in the equation? Like, are people going to change, do you think, how they try to claim or not claim ownership over something that they might have created, or what they consider to be public versus private? Is that, do you think if there were a decoupling of the compensation and the sustainability in terms of the economics of creation with the act of creation, is that a big change? Is that a small change? Like,
I mean, in copyright law, we try to protect both economic interests and moral interests. And so by moral interest, I mean like a person's even interest in being named as the author of their work or being kept anonymous, a person's interest in the integrity of their work, what do you use my work for? So I may not be interested in being compensated, but I may be interested in how my work is being used. And I may also be interested in being credited for the use of my work. So even if we dissociate, the economic aspect, we may not really deal with all of the issues that creators have regarding the use of their work for generative AI.
Great. Well, thank you for, I think, a very interesting conversation. And I also want to thank all the members of the audience for attending today. As you know, this is a fundraiser for the Campus Food Bank. And so all of the proceeds for tonight's event will go in support of our students in the Campus Food Bank, so thank you. And you'll be getting notice of upcoming speaker series. I don't think we've planned one yet, but I know that there will be one in the coming months. And we're delighted that you're able to join us. And so once again, please join me in thanking our panelists.